You are tuned in to the Story Behind the Business podcast. My name is Leland, and I am here with my co-hosts Joel McDonald and Adam Bessie. And this podcast, like usual, is brought to you by the Westland Group of Companies and Agency Media.
So our guest today has very cool background. As I was researching her before she came on, started in Ottawa, Ontario, working in Parliament Hill for almost 10 years. I'm very excited to ask her about that. She is now the VP of Partnerships at Hawke Media. Our guest today is Ashley Scorpio. Good afternoon, Ashley.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me.
A very cool background career-wise and also Zoom-wise.
Thank you. Yeah.
I thought that's where you were going with that, Joel.
These are our little Hawks here, working at Hawke Media, even though it's spelled Hawke. The hawk, the bird, is actually part of our logo.
Yeah, I think it should be pointed out for people that are listening and not watching this that Ashley is the first person that has ever figured out how to change your background, because we have TELUS Business Connect, which is like a skin of Zoom. And she's the only one that's figured it out. And I've been jealous ever since she did it because I can't figure it out.
Well, tip for anyone who's interested, who's also using it, snap camera filters. You can actually create a background as a filter.
And that's a third party. That's a third party app that you're just running in conjunction with Business Connect.
That is correct.
Yeah. Do you in Business Connect then set your camera as that app? Is that how that works?
Yeah. So if you just go to the video settings, it's like an up arrow, and then you would select Snap Camera. And Snap Camera is obviously similar to Snapchat. So a lot of people are familiar with Snapchat filters. So similarly, how you can create a filter within Snap from your mobile device, you can also create a Snap filter from the desktop application Snap Camera. And it's compatible with Zoom. It's compatible apparently with TELUS Business Connect and several other applications. And you can do the fun and hilarious filters, where you do some of those cutesy things with ears and freckles and things, or you can actually make the filter a background.
I don't know if you've noticed this, Ashley, but since you started talking, both of these guys are Googling it, I can tell. And I think they're downloading it like as you're saying. Leland was like locked in on his computer, and he's like, I'm downloading it.
I'm getting it.
I can't wait for something more exciting to pop up. Maybe one of you guys will end up with some bunny ears or doe eyes. Who knows?
Yeah. Ashley, love to just start about your background. Maybe we could just start there. So you spent almost 10 years on Parliament Hill working for prime ministers and all sorts of people. Maybe you could just start with that. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing working with the government.
Sure. Yeah. It was a really long journey. I started off as a volunteer in high school working on campaigns, and I worked my way up. I've done virtually everything you can imagine in politics, from just literally knocking on doors and stuffing envelopes with direct mail, all the way to managing, the largest paid social media budget at the national level for a political party during a federal election campaign. And I've done that in municipal, provincial, and federal politics. My primary focus was in federal politics. I worked directly for the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, International Trade, and Sport. And for about 5 years, I was the most senior aide to the Parliamentary Secretary for International Trade. So my public policy areas of expertise in particular are international trade and foreign affairs, having worked for 2 cabinet members who were specifically in those areas. So that was a real interest of mine. And I also worked directly in the executive office of the Prime Minister's office, so directly for the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, which, beyond elected officials, is always one of the most important and powerful members of government who is an unelected official, sort of behind the scenes, advising and working in that capacity. So I had a lot of senior roles as an aide to those types of individuals, and I've done, again, virtually anything and everything you can imagine in that capacity on the Hill, whether it's correspondence and working with constituents to help solve some of their different sort of casework, which could be immigration, it could be related to employment insurance, which is something we're hearing a lot about today, or in Canada, healthcare, because that's obviously a government-provided program. So anything from correspondence casework all the way to communications and memos and press releases and committee meetings and briefings and things like that. And then obviously once you get into sort of the foreign affairs and international trade side of things, it gets really fun and interesting. You get to liaise with all these other individuals from all over the world who are there representing their countries in their embassies and consulates, and, you know, brokering those sorts of relationships. And myself, I've actually lived in 3 different countries. I've lived in 2 different states. I speak a couple languages. So for me, that was really interesting, sort of the diplomatic side of things.
Cool.
So
can I jump in really quickly? And I don't want to, I'm a political ranter, so I won't head down that path.
Let's go.
But I could with you, and I think that would be really interesting. That's for another podcast, I guess. But I have a question for you. While you were there for that long, was that ever with, well, obviously it was with a switch in government. How does that look? I've always wondered, when you're in a position like that, does the position just continue, or because it's not an elected official, so we go from conservative to liberal or vice versa, is there a shift there as well, or do you just keep going and it's a new person you're working with now?
That is a great question. So I actually served at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, and he's actually one of the longest serving prime ministers in the history of Canada. I believe actually the second longest serving prime minister. So he was actually in office for the entirety of my tenure as an aide in his government. And during that time, his party formed the government. Obviously, in a parliamentary system, a number of parties can have seats in government at the same time, but he was the prime minister for the duration of my time on Parliament Hill. But anytime there is an election, obviously individual members and parties can rise and fall. And so depending on what your role is, you know, if you're working for a specific MP or member of parliament and they get reelected and you had a specific role in their office before, you would probably continue in that role. Now, if they lost their seat, if they lost the election, your role and their role as the elected official would be eliminated. Similarly, if you were working in a government ministry, like the Prime Minister's office or the Secretary of State's office or any specific portfolio, like let's say the Department of Defense or Foreign Affairs, things like that. If the government changes, then the ministries change, and all of that staff loses their jobs overnight.
It's a risky career, right?
Very.
Even if you're not at the forefront of politics, it's a risky career.
100%.
Without talking your politics, then we won't get into that. Last political question for me, I promise. Were you involved in Stephen Harper's in that government because that's the government you align with?
Yes. Politics is partisan. It's the nature of the beast.
Yes.
And you can certainly work in government as a bureaucrat in a far more stable, less risky role that typically has a lot of job security. And those types of bureaucratic roles are nonpartisan, and they're not affected by the rise and fall of governments. So you could work in a department for like the deputy minister, who's an unelected official, whose job sort of ensures continuity across governments. But if you're working directly in a minister's office, a prime minister's office, and so on and so forth, you are what is called an exempt staff. And you're typically exempt from a lot of those labor laws that typically protect you and secure your job because you serve at the pleasure of that prime minister or that minister or that member of parliament. And of course, there can be by-elections, there can be sudden changes, people can resign. We all know there can be scandals. Lots of things can happen. Anything can happen, really. And so, typically you align with the candidate or party that your core values sort of match. And typically, if you are working in an office, even in a government office as one of those exempt staff, you usually have political experience on the campaign side, outside of government. That's obviously something they look for. Because usually what happens is when the election time comes around, and it's called the writ in Canada. So when the writ drops, the government is dissolved. And typically, some of the staff needs to stay on to continue serving constituents at that time, but a number of staff will resign or take a leave of absence and unpaid leave or resign completely, and they will go work or volunteer for free to help re-elect their boss to secure their own job.
So when that tenure ended, were you just like, okay, I'm out, I'm going to the US? Like, how did you go from politics in Canada as a job over into VP of partnerships at Hawke?
Sure. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I've actually lived in 3 different countries, and I've lived in the United States before, and I've also lived in another state before. So I currently live in California. I previously lived in Florida. So, both really characters of states, if states had personalities,
Right.
both in the Sun Belt. So obviously something I'm after as a Canadian. But yeah, so I had a really long run. I mean, politics is extremely intense. There is no downtime. There are no days off. Everything is 24/7. It's very similar actually to an agency or startup environment. Very natural alignment and fit there with the lifestyle and the work ethic, I would say. So that was sort of what drew me to the agency world and startups. I'd always worked in startups outside of politics. I'd done a lot of marketing in startups for a number of years, mostly starting in 2008, outside of my main role on Parliament Hill and on campaigns, because a lot of it is directly translatable. So all of politics is really marketing. I mean, of course, there's 2 types of people that work for politicians. There's like the comms people who are basically marketers, which is where I fit in with my skill set. And then there's sort of the policy wonks or data type people, data scientists. And that would also have a naturally transferable skill set to the private sector as well. But a lot of politics is storytelling. In e-commerce, which is an area that we focus on at Hawke Media, we're helping brands tell their stories, and we're helping them sell a product and helping them reach their customer or their ideal consumer. And in politics, the persona or the personality you're working with and their public policy ideas, those are your products that you're selling. And it's actually inherently more difficult than selling a product or a doodad or gadget or whatever it might be to a consumer, because, a consumer might have more than $1 they can spend somewhere, and they could spend it all over and they could spread it around. And in politics, you only have 1 vote. So each individual elector has 1 vote, hopefully, in a fair
Right.
system. And so when you're trying to convince them and bring them on board to support your candidate and your vision for the country or your city or your school board, you really have to drill down and tell that story and reach them. And again, it's very like marketing 101. The channels are different. Of course, they've modernized and politics has gone to digital over the years as well, but it's all the same. You're telling a story, you're segmenting your audience, you're building a database, you're reaching them on email, more traditional channels that politics is known for, TV, radio, billboards, direct mail, email now being an old school tenet of digital. It's core in political fundraising. And then, of course, the newer channels like social media, which we've seen a huge rise of, in particular in American politics throughout this administration. It took a long time for politics as an industry to get with the times and get on those channels. But even what we've seen develop in the past few cycles here, it's becoming a core part of any winning electoral strategy. We first saw it with Obama, with SMS marketing. Then we most recently saw it with Trump, with a lot of his outreach and organic reach on Twitter, for example. We, of course, saw it with databasing with Cambridge Analytica. So again, politics is becoming more and more savvy on these digital platforms that, again, you would traditionally use in the private sector to reach consumers. Like, for example, at Hawke Media, we have an amazing SMS provider that we work with called Postscript. And they help brands reach their consumers over SMS, which is a new channel. It's inherently starting to cut into email. We all get a lot of emails. Email can be clunky. We can feel overwhelmed. We're all getting spam, despite what legislation is in place to protect our sanity and our inboxes. We all get spam, right? Just like the junk mail we get, the flyers we get in the mailbox, that's the digital version. And so in an ever-increasing mobile world, more and more people are on mobile, especially during this pandemic. And so SMS is like a new frontier to reach people, even in e-commerce. And we first saw it in politics to great effect. So there's a lot in these 2 industries that really can mirror each other.
Actually, I'd like to just maybe pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about Hawke Media and what you guys are up to. And maybe you could just talk to us about what is your role there. And then maybe we could just, sometimes we what we like to do is just split this up as pre-COVID and post-COVID as far as what were you guys doing before, and then maybe we can kind of dive into some of the things that you guys are doing now.
Absolutely. So maybe it would be good to give a little bit of an overview of Hawke Media before even just introducing myself. So Hawke Media, we're an award-winning digital marketing and ad agency. We are a full-service agency and also a consultancy. We are most known for our outsourced CMO offering. We are headquartered in LA. We have offices in New York and Boston. And to your point, what's a little different now post-COVID is we're all working from home. We are actually very early in the game to send everyone home. For myself, I've actually been in self-quarantine now for 50 days today, 50. So it's been a little while. I haven't seen the sun.
You haven't left your house?
No, only on a handful of occasions just to pick up groceries and essentials, like to get a pneumonia vaccine and to pick up groceries and to see a doctor.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Are you going crazy yet?
Not yet. I have everything I need. You know, it could always be worse. It could always be better, but it could always be worse. So
yeah, right
that was one thing we did differently. We do digital work. We have a lot of excellent tools like other companies that we leverage, like Slack, like Zoom, in order to facilitate a lot of the daily stand-ups and calls that we have to ensure we're working efficiently. So that's a little bit different of what we've done. And then, as a business, we work with businesses of all sizes. And what's different about us as an agency is we offer all of our services on a monthly, so month-to-month a la carte basis. A lot of agencies have a monthly minimum, 3 months, 6 months, 12-month minimum when you sign on for them. And we like to say, we like to date before we marry. We like to give brands and our clients that flexibility to build up that rapport, that relationship, and that comfort with us, so that they're comfortable moving forward and feel like we're really helping them grow and meet their growth goals as a business and at a reasonable price point, that they want to continue and not immediately just be locked in from the get-go with those monthly minimums. So since our inception, we've worked with well over 1,500 brands, including Verizon, RedBull, Tomorrow Melon, The Sill. Our depth of marketing is extremely precise and unique, and anything and everything you can imagine in digital marketing, we do. So beyond your core tenets of search, social, SEO, email, we also do the SMS or lifecycle marketing that I mentioned. We also do content, affiliate, and influencer marketing. So it really runs the gambit. And in about 7 years of operations, we've grown from about 7 people to over 150.
Wow.
Oh, it's big. Question that, so you've positioned yourself as this, or one of your positioning statements is that you're an outsourced CMO. So CMO is the general idea of that is that you are going into brands and effectively becoming their marketing department. Is that how that looks? And that being said, do you guys then do traditional as well, or is it strictly on the digital side? Because I look at, you guys have worked with some huge brands. And if you, thinking when I've been on the client side for some time working for a large company, if you were to come in and as kind of the point person on the operating arm of all of our marketing initiatives, there's a spider web of 360 activities to activate. Do you guys handle all of that then for your clients?
So one of the core offerings we have that I didn't mention is strategy. So the outsourced CMO are really high-level digital strategists. They do have some background in traditional marketing, and they're able to do a high-level sort of overview of all those different efforts. They're able to help assess the overall health of the business, come up with a good go-to-market strategy for new businesses that are looking to launch, help a business, set up all of their analytics and get all of that in order and do cleanup, if they already have some things in place, uncover sort of what's working, what isn't working, help them understand the value of a customer. What is the lifetime value of a customer? And based on that, what should they be willing to pay for a new customer? So these sort of core tenets and foundational things that you'd be surprised how many businesses don't know the answers to these basic questions and maybe don't have a strategy that's modeled around that. Too many businesses are focused just on, the specific return on ad spend of one campaign or the return on investment they're seeing of a few ad sets versus, what can I afford to pay for a new customer based off of what does my best customer look like? And how do I find more customers that look just like my best customer? So our strategists are able to provide that expertise and oversee all of that on the digital side of things, in addition to helping manage or assist with any sort of traditional insights. But as for the services that we offer and manage ourselves, they're all on the digital side.
Cool.
Yeah, when you say, and you mentioned, and I, for most people listening, if you're in the agency world, then you know how scary it could be on a month to month. But obviously, you say it with such confidence. So you guys are. Your Hawke Media, I shouldn't say you guys, Hawke Media is very confident in obviously their ability to deliver. Maybe you can kind of walk us through why that methodology, why in a world where everybody's trying to make sure they're securing their next maybe paycheck, you're leading off with, no, try us out for the month, and if you like us, great. If not, go to somebody else. So that's question number one, and then I have a follow-up question right after that one because I didn't want to put it all in one question here.
No worries. I couldn't agree more. It's obviously a very risky business model for us. We're taking on and we're assuming a lot of the risk because, as a lot of marketers who are listening might know, there's a lot of upfront work with onboarding a new client, whether you're a consultant or you're in an agency setting. There's a lot of thought and planning that goes into even the most basic of campaigns. You don't just throw some stuff together and let it run, at least not if you're hoping to ensure great results and quality. You have to do some market research. You have to go back through what they've done historically. You have to crunch the numbers. You need to plan. You need to, even before you launch the campaigns, right? You need to think about, what are we going to test? Are we going to do an A/B test? Are we going to do a split test? Are we going to test the creatives? Are we going to test the audiences? And so on and so forth. How much should we be spending? How can we refine the budgets? Where should we be investing, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of thought and planning that goes into it, and a lot of upfront work that it takes to onboard a new client, get them launched, get them running. And often you won't see results in the first few weeks, depending on what type of campaign is, how big of a budget you're spending, what the investment is, and what channel you're running on. So it can be risky because, especially if a client doesn't understand all of those nuances and everything that goes into it, they might just feel, oh, it's been a week or it's been 2 weeks. Why haven't we seen results? And one, it might be the planning stage. Something might not have launched in the first week. It depends on, again, what your upfront contract was, what your understanding was, and the timeline that was agreed upon. But yeah, so it's extremely risky. I think there's a big piece of it is education on our part and making sure that the clients we work with really feel like partners. We're their marketing partners. We want to be a part of their team. We want to be an extension of their team. And we want to work well to ensure that they see success. So, there's a lot of ways to show immediate success for a client by, let's say, just doubling down on retargeting. And that'll show immediate, wow, awesome results. But that'll dry up really quickly because guess what? If you don't have a full funnel strategy and you're not constantly refilling the funnel and prospecting, if you just go hard at the very bottom of the funnel retargeting everyone, well, guess what? Pretty soon it'll dry up and there'll be no one to retarget because you're not filling up that funnel. And, prospecting campaigns aren't as sexy in some ways because you often don't see a great return on prospecting campaigns. Which, if you're a marketer, this, you understand why. You're going after net new people. They may have never heard of the brand. The average person needs at least 7 impressions of a new brand before taking action, for example. But if you have that understanding, those data points, that you should be looking holistically at a full funnel marketing strategy that covers, each aspect of the customer journey. And so, yeah, I think it's very risky for us, but I think there are pros and cons to it. So one part is the core part of our philosophy, which is we want to ensure that there's accessible marketing for all, which is why our prices are so competitive and also why we offer this risky model where we take on the risk, because we want to ensure that small, medium, and startup businesses feel like they can take on an external marketing partner like Hawke. In a lot of ways, startups are really locked out of agencies otherwise because they only have so much runway in between rounds or pre-rounds, if they're pre-seed or pre-series A, depending where they are in their startup journey. And so often agency expertise is eliminated as an option. And so, our COO, Tony, he thinks it's really important that everyone has accessible, the ability to engage sort of with accessible marketing expertise, in particular because there are a lot of snake oil salesmen in marketing. It's really too bad. There's a lot of people that sort of try and take advantage of business owners and merchants and promise quick results. And some of them are leveraging, black hat SEO techniques. Some of them are just doubling down on retargeting. Some of them are using bots. Some of them are using sort of really clickbaity headlines in sort of even affiliate links and things that don't look and feel great and can degrade the brand and the branding of the product. So again, it depends what you're after. It depends who your audience is. But there are a lot of shady practices in the marketing industry. And we're really passionate about sort of like elevating marketing and ensuring that we have a higher caliber of end results with the services we deliver. And we want to be able to deliver that to people. And now what's different in post-COVID-19 pandemic world, or ongoing, I should say, is that as risky as this model may be for us, it's actually paid off, because at this time we are regularly bringing on new clients on a daily basis. And I think partially because even though some business owners are scared and they're uncertain and none of us really knows how this is going to play out or what timing looks like, some business owners have realized now is a good time to invest, because look, across the board, we've seen the cost for advertising come down across all these channels, because there have been so many businesses that aren't in a good position to advertise at this time for obvious reasons. They're in hospitality, they're in brick and mortar, their supply chains are tangled up. They're not able to continue offering their products and services. So all of those people who aren't in a position to continue marketing have pulled out. And some others have pulled out of fear. And for those that have pulled out of fear that have all those other ducks in a row, it's really unfortunate because their competitors are eating their lunch. And those few that were brave and bold have doubled down or recently come on with us. And they're seeing just incredible numbers, great cost per acquisition for new customers, really voracious, in particular in e-commerce, voracious consumers at this time. We've heard that, for example, where I'm from in Canada, the parcel service there, Canada Post, is saying they're seeing Christmas level packages being delivered daily. So it's absolutely incredible right now. It's an incredible time, in particular in e-commerce.
Yeah, sorry, Joel, I know you might have had a question. I just want to bring up the fact that, like, being able to sprint like you guys are month to month, obviously you have some pretty dialed in processes. I'm just curious, and not to get on a process talk here, but I'm just curious in terms of dealing with a customer who might have an agency of record, and you guys are coming in maybe for like a wedge campaign, or you're here to just take a portion of that marketing budget that they have. What's it like when you're communicating with another marketing team or another marketing agency when you are the new kids on the block, or you're trying to prove your worth in the situation? You must have some pretty strong communication skills from your guys' side of the business.
Absolutely. I mean, we all play nicely in the sandbox. There's more than enough work to go around. We're more than capable of liaising with any number of other agencies on one account. I mean, there's so many different types of agencies, even if we're working directly with what otherwise might be a competitor who does the exact same types of digital marketing advertising that we do. We're professionals. We can all work together. If they're handling the social side, maybe we're handling the search side for one reason or another. Maybe we have a better relationship with that particular channel provider. Maybe we have greater expertise in that area, and maybe that's why they brought us into it. It's a possibility. The other thing is there are all other types of agencies too that don't necessarily do the same things that we do. So there might be a creative agency or a PR agency. For example, as the VP of Partnerships, I own all of these relationships with our third-party partners, whether they're platforms, MarTech, ad tech that we leverage for our clients, or other agencies. So we regularly get asked for those other types of either technology, implementation, public relations, traditional marketing, types of things that we don't provide at all. And we're always more than happy to make those recommendations and even direct introductions to our, warm introductions to our points of contacts. At the end of the day, we just want our clients to be happy, to be well served, and get excellent access to whatever services they're looking for and be well taken care of.
Right on. Ashley, I was on your website actually a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's kind of cool the way you guys kind of got out, kind of right in front of this thing. You guys did a quarantine conference. I wasn't able to attend, but you had a number of guests. You guys have written a number of blogs on things you should be doing during this time. I'm curious from a tactical standpoint. You talked about the deliveries are happening at a rapid pace. What are some of the tactical changes you guys have seen and or making with your clients during this time?
Sure, yeah. So on our end, like you said, we've been putting out a lot of digital content and thought leadership accessible to the general public and our clients to help them. The quarantine conference we put together, it was a full day virtual conference. We organized that in about 2.5 weeks. Our head of experiential, because we usually also do experiential events, IRL, when that's available. That is one of the few, I guess, traditional services that we do offer because we get asked for it so much. Our head of experiential events and marketing, Angel, just did such an incredible job putting together over 9.5 hours of programming free to everyone. And we had over 4,100 registrants. So we were absolutely overwhelmed by the appetite from the general public and that audience for this type of content. And so now we are doing a weekly COVID report on our website. Again, free, ungated content available to everyone, sort of giving people an overview of what we're seeing in the industry, what we're seeing in e-commerce and digital at large. We're also putting together a hub of resources for merchants and small businesses that are offers either from the government or some of our other private sector partners. We've highlighted a lot of data from the partners that we work with. I know last week we had some highlights from our partners at Waze, Klarna, and Klaviyo. So, we're just aggregating data across the board to make it accessible and legible to everyone, just so they can digest it instead of having to find it from all these different sources. And then on the client side, so that's sort of what we're doing on the agency side for all. And then on the client side, we're seeing a lot of really interesting shifts. So again, there's been an ongoing trend for several years now to mobile first. I think we're going to continue to see that, and we're going to continue to see an accelerated growth in that more and more people are on mobile devices. And especially now, everyone's at home for the most part, other than, our essential heroes. And so I think we're going to see more and more mobile first design when it comes to websites, when it comes to checkout processes, load times, all of those sorts of things that can be optimized on any, brand or company's site. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing interest, like I said, in SMS, as well as chatbots. So one of our partners, Octane AI, they do conversational commerce, and they have Facebook Messenger chatbots, in particular for brands. So they're really great. People often experience some customer service issues. You don't always want to call in and be on hold all the time. What if you could just talk to your brand on Facebook Messenger? You'd be surprised how popular it is. And not just for, complaints and customer service, but also for new product launches and upsells and cross-sells, and that's sort of the opportunities that brands see in it. They see the average AOV increase when they install, a chatbot offering like Octane AI. So we've seen an increase in chatbots, in SMS, in mobile first. We've also seen an increased interest in other mobile platforms like Snap and TikTok. So we obviously have great relationships with both platforms. Right now, we're working on creating some content around both of them as well for the general audience. I see you're laughing. I'm sure it's because we've all seen, the typical TikTok content. And
no, actually, you might not know this, but we are right now in the same video chat as a TikTok star. Leland has, how many TikTok views do you have now, Leland?
Just about 300,000 views on my one video. I'm pretty proud of it.
Just about.
It gets brought up in every podcast.
No, I'm not dancing. No, I'm not. No, I'm not doing anything to make fun of myself, being a big dude. But I created a video one day randomly, and it's now at 300,000 views, and I'm pretty proud of it. Terrible
That's
conversion
awesome.
rate from views to followers.
Sure.
But it's out there. You know, the guy at Pizza Hut, I went in to get my kid his pizza last week, and no, they don't believe me, but it happened. Hey, I just saw you on TikTok. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
It's absolutely shocking what kind of reach you can get on a platform like that. For example, I know the co-founder of Octane, who's one of our partners, Matt, had been experimenting with it because they do so much in the mobile and chat space. And in a few months of just putting out content here and there, just like you, happened to just explode on an audience. And to your point, though, difference between reach and conversion rate, even when it came to views versus followers on the platform. And again, similarly for a brand, the difference between reach and just an impression of a new brand versus actual, let's say, maybe purchases. So that's why brands always have to think about, what are we leveraging a platform for, a specific platform? What part of the funnel does it fit into? Is it at the prospecting stage? Is it at the engagement stage, the consideration phase? Is it at the purchase stage? Yeah, so I think that's always something any brand should consider when they're thinking about where they're spending their time and what platforms they can use in their mix for what part of the funnel.
Look at that. Me bringing up my TikTok video on one of these podcasts finally had some value.
Well, I mean, to kind of go into what you were saying there, how when you're communicating with your clients and the brands that you're working with, do you ever get pushback from some of them in terms of conveying how important brand awareness and reach still is? You know, everybody, especially if you're dealing with a startup or someone who has limited cap on their budget, it's all about the ROI. It's all about, what am I seeing directly in return for what we're spending? What's some of the ways that you communicate that to a client in order to kind of help move them along your guys' process?
Certainly. I think, again, it depends on the client that you're working with and what their level of expertise and background is in marketing in general, and even in business. I mean, it depends who they are and what their background is. You might be working with, an awesome style icon who now launched an apparel line, but has previously never been in business at all. So there could always be an upfront piece of education. But at the end of the day, I'd say that the reason why people bring Hawke or any other third party into an engagement is because they defer to our expertise. And we build that relationship and rapport with them, and we establish ourselves over the course of the engagement with the results that we deliver. So I think it's always important to have that educational piece. We offer a lot of thought leadership beyond our, one-to-one client relationships and conversations. We also offer free consultations and free audits for anyone else who's interested too. And I think over the course of that kind of engagement, we build that rapport, and that's ultimately what they're paying us for. So again, I just think it's really important to always have sort of like an upfront understanding or an upfront contract with them of, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we investing time and resources on a specific channel? Where does it fit into the mix? And again, like my previous comments, top of funnel is just as important as bottom funnel. You'll see results on one later and the other sooner rather than later. And it depends on where in that funnel the customer is in their journey, right? So if it's a completely new brand, pre-launch or pre-traction, they maybe don't have any customers at all. So they understand that, hey, we need to do a big branding play. No one's ever heard of us. Maybe no one's even ever heard of the concept. It might be a whole new thing to address a problem. It might be a whole new cool invention that people don't know about and need to understand how it works or why it works or, what the value proposition is. So in that sort of situation, it's an easier sell on the branding and sort of prospecting side of things. If it's a more established brand, they might feel that they're sort of past that. But that being said, if you're not always looking for new customers, if you're not always looking to grow, you will become stagnant. And I think if you talk to virtually any business owner, they want to grow. I mean, it's one thing to retain your customers, and loyalty is really important. And that's a big piece that we always talk to people about as well, is loyalty. And how can you re-engage your current customers? How can you offer them something for their business? Is there, a refer a friend program you could implement, or a discount you could offer just for them, for their business as a thank you? So loyalty is really important, but it's just as important as bringing new customers into the mix as well.
You touched on it there, Ashley, where we've noticed this up here as well, where, traditionally we might try to talk to a customer and they might say to us, we don't need you. We have all the business in the world. We don't need any new customers. We're fine. We're great. And now what we're finding is obviously that the whole world's been turned upside down. And even if you're in a business that maybe hasn't been affected too much, you start to see how quickly things can change and how quickly your business can go from having an abundance of customers. I'm just looking at your list here on your blog, to all of a sudden you're in the top 10 fastest declining categories. And it's like, oh my goodness, what do you do?
I couldn't agree more. And that's why businesses need to be dynamic. They need to be nimble, and they also need to be willing to pivot. Just because you're a brick and mortar business at this time doesn't mean you just throw your hands up in the air and accept failure. Our VP of sales, who I work very closely with, his number one thing that he always says every day is refuse to lose. And that's something that we really instill in Hawks. And I hope we can carry on to our clients too, is, people's businesses are their babies. It's their livelihoods. The average business employs a number of people, right? Even if it starts as like a mom and pop shop. And there's no reason why we should let this pandemic wipe them out. They've obviously provided a valuable good or service for some time, and there's no reason why they can't continue to do so and maybe even flourish at this time. They just have to figure out a way to reach the market segment or pivot. So let's say, you're a restaurant. Okay, people can't come in and join you for dinner anymore and sit down, but could you do curbside pickup? Could you do delivery? Maybe. What would it take to sort of onboard that and then let the general public and your customers know that you're offering it? We also have a partner of ours that brick and mortar gyms in Canada, 12 locations across the country, had just opened a few more, and then this hit. And obviously for health and safety reasons, had to shut the doors. And so obviously, that's the core business. Gym membership, you go into the gym to work out. Well, what can you do? You go virtual, go digital. And so Innovative Fitness has now started offering classes online. We actually have a really fun virtual event series ourselves called Nighthawk. And our first session is actually with the CEO of Innovative Fitness, Curtis. And it's called Gym and Juice. So, anyone who wants to come and get their sweat on can join us there as well.
Well, one of the things we've been doing this month, Ashley, is talking to people in all sorts of different industries. And we just kind of chuckled because we had Curtis on the podcast last week. And so we talked to him about Innovative Fitness. And yeah, it was amazing what he did as far as, pivoting that business. It was very cool. One of the things I like to ask all of the people that we interview, Ashley, is what are you doing? So you mentioned right off the top, even in your house for 50 days. You've come on this podcast. You have incredible energy. It's contagious. Yet you've been in your house for so long. How are you doing mentally on a daily basis? A really weird, tough time.
Sure.
What are some things you do to stay, to keep going, stay positive, have energy?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really up and down. It's a tough time. I personally am very high risk. I have asthma and an autoimmune condition, and I take immunosuppressants. So the reason I've been in self-quarantine for so long is I, started taking additional precautions a bit sooner than the general public. And, I obviously have to think critically about what my, exit strategy is as far as exiting self-quarantine will be. Because again, it might have to be a little different than the average person's. So it can be really stressful and anxiety inducing thinking about, upending my routines and my schedule. And I love going into the office. We have a beautiful office. We call it the Nest. Big open space, very comfortable. We are a partner of Very, so formerly Very Desk. So we are very comfortable there with all the Very desks and equipment. Yeah, pun intended, I guess. And so, I mean, I miss the office personally. I hope we can return sooner rather than later. But yeah, I mean, you just have to do the best you can with what you've got. I mean, I have a dog that helps a lot. We have a dog-friendly office at Hawke, so usually she comes to work with me, but now I guess I'm staying home with her. We still get a lot of great time together. I do know she misses the office as well, because usually there's a lot of socialization with other people and other dogs. So it's a little unfortunate, but I honestly think you just take it day by day, and a positive attitude is going to get you a lot further than anything else.
Right on.
Well said, Ashley. Well, I would like to give you the opportunity before we officially wrap. What's the best way to follow you or check you out online? Like, what's
Sure.
your platform of choice that you like to connect with people?
Yeah, I mean, you guys can find me anywhere and everywhere. I'm at Ashley Scorpio across all social. That's my last name, Scorpio. So at Ashley Scorpio on Instagram, LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Snap, you name it, I'm there. Even on Telegram. I used to work in crypto, so I'm on the gram, all the grams. But yeah, if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn, more than happy to chat further and answer any other marketing questions. And like I said, at Hawke Media, we also offer free consultations and free audits. And I'm just Ashley at hocmedia.com.
Ashley, thank you so much for being a guest on Story Behind the Business today. So from everybody on this side of Canada, Vancouver, we say thank you.
Thanks a lot,
No
Ashley.
worries.
It was great.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure. It was a great chat, and hope to do it again soon.